We're back at the downhill zone where Adam has further tweaked my Arrival. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just like everything just so, and Adam knows how to make it just so. So the brakes didn't agree with me. I've not had good luck with Maguras. I had the MT-5s on. And with Adam's guidance, I went with the Code RSCs. I do have them on a different bike, and I've been surprised at how much I like them because Hope has always been my standard go-to over the years. But the RSCs were available, and SRAM is becoming kind of the standard. I mean, you can find the parts everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a consideration with, we should say there's a lot of considerations with brake choice, what you and I were kind of talking about earlier, whereas brake feel is a fairly unique thing between manufacturers, and it can sometimes be almost as personal as a grip or a saddle or a pedal. When you find a brake feel that you like, it's such... I remember I had a customer a long time ago who was telling me that brake feel is like a bicycle's handshake. It's like, that's like that. It gives you a certain impression, a certain confidence, and a certain feel when you ride the bike. And when your braking is such an intuitive process, it has to be ready and it has to feel exactly the way you expect it to feel. People, once they kind of attach to a certain brand or a certain style of braking, they usually stay with it. And I mean, the big distinct ones would be Shimano has their servo wave and their power is delivered in a unique way. And some people really like that, but it's also, some people don't. And then,
now, Shimano's used to have a lot of noise. Have they solved that?
Well, noise has nothing to do with brand in reality. It's basically just the particulars of pad rotor combination. These are metallic pads. These are going to make noise if you ride them when it's wet and cold.
Yeah.
I mean, Shimano's the same deal.
But they're also grabby. I always found Shimano's to be
that's what we're talking about with feel. And so yeah, they deliver their power all up front with that servo wave. The Maguras, depending on which model, the 7s definitely hit pretty hard right away. The 5s less so. They have more modulation at the bite.
Right.
But the SRAMs, the Code RSCs to me feel very similar in some of the ways as a Hope.
The Hope, yeah.
There's a lot of similarities between the two as far as their modulation, their feel, how you actually use them, where they make power, and how they make power. Then yeah, like what we were talking about though, the nice thing about the SRAM family, so that's RockShox, that's SRAM, anything in their realm, it's usually pretty easy to find parts and spares and seal kits. And this is so.
Whereas with the Hopes,
well,
it's kind of more of a gamble,
right? Just because they are really restricted in their manufacturing right now, they're just not. They're just kind of slower. But one of the main things when you're talking about SRAM and Hope versus Shimano or Magura or whoever, they still offer service packs, and
yes,
this is something that I still do not understand.
I know
that like
big deal.
Brake systems have rubber seals and fluid, just like your fork, just like any hydraulic system. It's gonna wear out. It's gonna need to be serviced. But for the life of me, I cannot understand Shimano and Magura. They do not offer service packs. And so if you fry your Shimano lever, you throw it away and put on a new lever. And this happens all the time. I mean, it's a well-known phenomenon. And then, Magura, they have a five-year leak-proof warranty. So if you have a problem, they will take care of it, but you got to send your brake system to them, and they will service or replace whatever and send it back to you. So it's just kind of, I like the idea of a $20 O-ring kit. We break it apart. I just rebuilt the rear caliper on those V4s from Hope. It's a tedious job. It's not easy, but it can be done. And now that guy's beautiful $600 red set of Hope V4s stays on his bike, and it keeps working. So, I'm
and the same with the calipers on the Shimano's,
oh yeah, they don't do anything.
Yeah, you basically
they don't do anything.
Yeah.
And we can. I'd love to have a conversation about how stupidly fragile the current Shimano pistons are, and they have this goofy ring on the outside edge. And if you're not super careful when you're pushing those pistons back to put in new pads, they've cracked a number of times. Not just me, customers have come in with cracked ones from trying to push their pads back, or just, I had one guy where the pads weren't lined up with the rotor, and just the fact that the pads were kind of not actuating straight, it cracked one. So
oh my God.
yeah, it is what it is. So I like the serviceability of those two brands. For sure, that's a big thing to like. And then of course, yeah, going to any bike shop USA when you're traveling, brake pads, rotors, you're gonna find SRAM stuff. So for sure, there's a lot of things to like. I mean, but also, but that's just ownership.
Yeah,
let's talk about the brakes itself.
Talk about the brakes, yeah, because
right.
the
And so
adjustability
these guys have been leading the way for quite a while when it comes to features that work, I think. I mean, and although we're going to see the new Hopes come out, and there's a lot of things that they've adapted. So these guys are using the seal bearing and the lever pivot, which is a subtlety, but really, really nice, because there's just no slop in that lever. It doesn't move. Wow. I mean, up or down at all. There's no play. I mean, it's solid. And then that means there's just like, there's no friction when you're pulling that lever. So that's a great detail. The new Hopes are going to have that. And then, you know, a contact adjuster that does make a difference.
Is that same as bite point? I mean,
yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, that's bite point. Yeah. You know, the Hope one works, but it works in conjunction with the piston. So when you turn the Hope one in, then you have to readjust your lever. Yes. Whereas these two are completely independent of one another, which is nice. It could be more aggressive. They could calibrate this, because everybody ends up with them almost turned all the way in, usually, as aggressive as short of contact. So they could change that to where it starts probably like almost where it is now at full in, and then be able to go even more aggressive. But other than that, you know, yeah, they're great. The other nice thing is ambidextrous. They flip-flop either way. Oh, so super simple for moto or standard.
They're integrated out of the box, right?
Yeah, so the RSCs come with the matchmaker system. You know, it can be added to any SRAM brake, but yeah, they ship it, which is a nice detail. And yeah, the lever shape is nice. You know, it's I like a broad kind of flat-ish lever without. I'm not a huge fan of the really aggressive hook that your Magura's had. I almost prefer the stock 5 because it's just a little more subtle.
I found it grew on me, and the levers didn't bother me.
Yeah, it's not bad. But yeah, these are these are a great shape. These are a really nice ergo, and then, you know, no tools. Everything just adjusts with knobs. Right. As far as the calipers go, they're a big 2-piece. You know, they bolt together. So they're easy to work on because they're just 2 halves. And they got the probably the easiest bleeding system on the market, I would say, because they use the bleeding edge system. So there's a little rubber boot that comes out here, but there's an interface on the inside, and so the bleeder just clicks in, and then you turn. The bleeder is the tool. Right. So you open up the bleed fitting with the syringe, and there's no drip, there's no fluid exposed at the caliper, so it's super clean. You're not introducing air, or you're not, you know, it's just a very well thought out system. And then, you know, you just use the 2 syringes. So I feel like their system.
And look at all the clearance there is here to get to actually pull out the.
Yeah, you can fully pull the pads out. Yeah, nice. Yeah. Like so, yeah, in general, they just kind of do the job. They just work. They're a big, powerful downhill brake, but they're totally appropriate on any trail, enduro, you know, anything where you just want a good, solid set of brakes.
And these are the rotors.
These are the new HS2s. So this is SRAM's latest rotor update. It's 2 millimeter thick. They've gone thicker than the don't touch it. Your fingers,
my hands are clean.
They are not clean. They have oils on them. We never touch a brake rotor with a hand if you can avoid it. Yeah, but they claim better heat dissipation, and obviously they're thicker, so they're going to be stiffer and last longer. You know, right. Yeah, that's just their latest one. They go all the way up to a 220 option now. Which is becoming more and more common on big 29ers, you know, enduros and downhill bikes with 29-inch wheels
and the e-bikes, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So nice to have that bigger option. Nice. And then these are stock metallic pads. That's what they ship with. Oh, obviously, SRAM offers their own organic pad, but I've had great luck with the Galfer stuff as of late. Right. And they offer both their Pro Green and then their e-bike purple. The e-bike purple has really shown itself as a killer option.
Is that right? Oh, okay.
Yeah, a huge amount of bite for a non-metallic pad. Great durability, but almost no noise, but more feel at the lever than a metallic option. So those have been nice.
And what is it about brakes? I mean, well, you talked a little bit about modulation.
Sure. The way the system.
People are very particular.
Well, right. You can almost think about them nowadays as the way you would think about a suspension system on a bike, because it's a linkage. You know, we're talking about a linkage and leverage rates. In this case, it's how much hydraulic pressure, how much fluid is being pushed from at the beginning of the lever stroke versus the end of the lever stroke. So there's going to be a certain amount of progression. There's going to be a certain amount of linearity, you know, bite point feel as far as like how it ramps up. There's a lot of different variables, flex in the system, swell in the line. But, you know, I would say most customers seem to be wanting as short a stroke as they can get. But, you know, subtle off the top so that you can just do a little bit of scrubbing of speed. But at the same time, you don't want a brake that's so sensitive that when you pull it just a little bit, it's already immediately slowing the bike down, at least for me.
Yeah.
And that's where I struggle with some of the Maguras, especially the 7s, is that there's just too much power happening too quickly. And the same thing with the Shimanos.
Right.
Because when it's rough and things are bouncing and jostling, it's sometimes very difficult to be super precise and controlled with a single digit. You know, you don't have the ability to just be really, really, you know, subtle with it when things are kind of, you need to be able to just kind of grab a handful, but not have it deliver so much power that you're just robbing all of your momentum.
Right.
And so that's where there's just a sweet spot that each company has to kind of fine tune.
Well, and for me, I like to go up in the hills, you know, up in the mountains in the summer. And a lot of switchbacks, a lot of, you know, technical stuff where you really need the modulation, I find. I don't like the grabbiness because you don't want to completely stop. You want to be able to slow and
right. I mean, and you know, your finger will adjust to any system eventually, but it's just
like you said, off the top.
Right. For me, it's you know, I don't like a brake system that's super grabby initially. I've been riding Hopes for ages. I do plan on trying a set of the Magura MT-5s on my next build, but it's going to be with a Galfer pad setup and a different rotor to try to fine tune some of the aspects of that. But yeah, the modulation is key. Right. You know, so.
Well, the other thing we did was we swapped out the seat post back to my bike yoke, and that's, you know, that's again kind of a personal.
Kind of. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can break down dropper choice, and
I just find it to be the smoothest and the most responsive and the most detailed. I mean, every little part of the dropper experience, if you want to say that. Yeah. They paid attention to. And
yeah, I would say not. I would say there isn't as much of a range of preference on dropper. It seems like there's a lot of people who just want a cheap dropper that's simple and works, and that's fine. But if you want something that's a performance product, but also I think is a cheaper post to run down the road as far as operational costs, because it has the reset feature that you can bleed out any squish. You're not having to do full rebuilds on a regular basis like you would with a reverb. You're not having to just replace the cartridge unit like a Lev or a PN Dub or a Raceface Effect, you know, where there's all these different brands that just use a sealed cartridge setup as the structure of the post. Right. And when that fails, you take it apart, throw that away, assuming you know there's no real service path to it. Some of them maybe, I mean, you can kind of DIY it, but they're not really designed to do that. And then put a new piece in. So I like the fact that there's a real easy way to reset this. Then you're basically just doing a basic service where you just take the thing apart, change out your seals, your glide rings, your pins, clean it, lube it, put it back together, and you barely ever see one that needs to have the internals taken apart.
German engineering.
It's pretty clever.
It's and you know, frankly, I mean, I've reset that thing. I've had it how long? 2 years? I don't know. I reset it once.
I did. It had a little
Did you
squish
reset
to
it?
it. Yeah, it had a
okay.
little squish
All right.
to it.
So there you go.
Yep.
But it's
easy
not
to do.
something you have to do all the time.
Not usually, no.
You think with something like that, oh, I'm going to have to be doing it every 6 weeks, but no,
Nah, it's not common.
Yeah.
Once it's good, it's good. I mean, that's the beauty of the design is it's not IFP based. It's a twin tube based system, so it's actually it's a less precise system. It basically is something that just can kind of account for real world conditions, and it just I think it's a better choice of design for this particular product. Yeah, they're great. And one of the other strong things they do is they make them in the bigger 34.9 clamp size that you would use in your Specialized or in your Evils or bikes that are using that larger post diameter, and that's a whole other conversation. Every brand should be going to bigger because the number one way to improve the durability and lifespan of droppers is to just make them bigger. Bigger bushings. That's the key. We need bigger structure, bigger bushings. It means less wear and less stress. So I think it should be a Fox 40 leg. I mean, I've been saying that for years.
Well, I hope they're not. Yeah.
It should be huge. Or you could go a la Cannondale Lefty. You could do a 4-sided with roller bearings like the Lefty leg, because then there would be no flex at all because it would be square-sided. This is still, we're still trying to cram. Forgive me. We're still trying to cram 10 pounds of shit into a 5-pound bag. Yeah. There's just such little real estate in this packaging. It needs to be bigger. Yeah. But these guys do the max version in that 34.9 size, and unlike most brands where they just make the outer tube bigger and then put the same guts in, so it's just heavier, like a Reverb or the Lev. These guys actually make one where everything is bigger. It's a completely different structure. Okay. The stanchion is bigger, the seal is bigger, all the guts are unique to that max version. So you got to give them credit because they really said, "Hey, we're gonna approach this and we're gonna be thorough, and we want to make something that takes advantage of the extra real estate." So,
I think I told you my Specialized, the Turbo Levo Pro, came with a 34.
Shimmed down
to 30.9.
Right, that's the common move just because of availability of bigger options.
Availability,
yeah.
Okay.
Because there's only a handful of manufacturers making that larger frame size. So a lot of brands still are like, we're not doing that. They're just, for them, it's not worth to tool up to a whole different setup.
But I did have problems with it. I had to send it in.
Was it a Fox?
It wasn't the shimming necessarily. The Fox, the transfer.
Yeah, sometimes
in the back.
Sometimes those posts get squishy.
Yeah.
Or they creep. Sometimes they'll creep.
Yeah, well, it was erratic. Sometimes it would pop back up, sometimes it wouldn't, and it was.
That's what I like about this system is that it's, like I said, the guts of it are almost simpler, but that's what makes it so easy to own and run. Is like you're not relying on a high pressure IFP and a super precise bleed. There can be air in the system, and then you just purge it out. So it's good stuff. It's a good product. And their lever is just super simple and clean. It's very light. It's very
the lever.
Nothing special, but it doesn't need to be. It does its job. The ergo's the right shape. It's modeled almost exactly off of a SRAM. If you look there, the shape is nearly identical. So you can get these to where your cockpit is feeling really, really symmetrical, which I do like.
Right.
Yeah, it's a
clean look too. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a
well. I'm running out of things to do with a bike, Adam.
Well, there's and it's funny. There's nothing sexy or exotic about these. They just kind of do their job. And that's kind of what you want from a brake system. However, I will say there are certain things to do for this bike that are sexy and exotic, and I can show you.
Oh yeah. Oh,
because I'm now a dealer for 5 Dev.
Oh yeah.
And so
those are sweet.
These would look excellent on this bike.
I think you were telling me they come in any length you want.
Well, they go down to I think 150.
Jeez.
Up to 175.
Wow.
And each one is made size specific because they're completely CNC'd from 7000 series block.
Okay.
So they aren't using forged blanks first like most manufacturers. Yeah. So each one, the end where the pedal is going to be tapered like this for extra ground clearance. Oh, nice. And so this, basically the length of it changes from here to here, not at this end.
Oh,
so each one always looks like this in its profile at the very end for maximum ground clearance if you're trying to get that. Made in San Diego, off of 5-axis machine. Really cool stuff. 30 mil or dub, SRAM chainring standard. So they pretty much can bolt into any bike, any system you got, and you can find chain rings, and it's
and yours for the
500 US for the package for this.
Uh-huh.
But you know, if you're considering it compared to other premium options like a carbon or you know, a titanium Cane Creek, these are half the price of that.
Yeah. The tires,
So I don't know. I think these are pretty sweet for what they are, because there is kind of a lack of options in this range as far as like a killer high-end set of cranks that isn't carbon. You know, that's really there's a void in the market there, and these guys are filling that quite nicely. Black or silver.
And how's carbon holding up in the crank sector these days?
It's hit and miss, but I mean, they're still kind of a prime offender when it comes to failures, and it's not necessarily like they're just catastrophically snapping in half, although we do see that from time to time. Typically that's going to be from some kind of a previous rock impact or some damage to the carbon. Typically you're not going to see it from just normal use unless you're running like a XC carbon crank on a downhill bike. But it's more often just the bonded in inserts. And so the whole point of why I'm such a fan of aluminum cranks is that the hard points of your aluminum crank, where your pedal threads in and where your spindle attaches, these have to be aluminum regardless of what you're making the crank arm out of, unless you're making it out of another metal. But they need to be metal. There's no way around this problem. So that means that the aluminum for your pedal and the aluminum for your spindle has to be bonded into that carbon. And as we kind of know, bonds are usually the weak failure point of all composite process. That's always going to be the #1 thing to be concerned about. It can be done. I mean, there are techniques and ways to do it to where they are solid and reliable. But when you look at the forces that are going through a crank arm, you know, the pedal's trying to do this, you know, and then the spindle is trying to move, you know, or the arm is trying to move about the spindle when you load it. You're putting it through a billion flex cycles over time, and they just seem to loosen up. So you'll see these get loose here. You'll see these get loose here. I would say that I've actually had better luck with the SRAM stuff than the race face stuff. The race face stuff has been high offender, but in general, because of the fact that we're attaching items to it, I'm a fan of just using metal for cranks, because it's like, if we already need to interface metal items with this, it should just all be metal. I mean, I like carbon when it can be in a solid tubular function, but when you start to have to bond stuff in, that's where it gets harder to
It doesn't feel like too much of a weight penalty on these.
No, these are super light.
Yeah.
These are under 500 grams for the setup. I mean, these are in the same, very similar weight range to Cane Creek tie and to like a good enduro carbon crankset. And again, though, do we care about trimming 50 or 100 grams out of a crank arm? I mean,
some people do,
but they shouldn't. Is my point, is they shouldn't.
That's for another podcast.
No, it's not. You save weight in a myriad of other places where it makes more of a difference. You want to do carbon rims, you want to do lighter tires, you want to do carbon handlebar, fine. Don't do it down here. It's just not, I just don't feel like it's the right place for it. That's my 2 cents.
All right, well, you got a customer here, so
no worries.
we better wrap it up, but thanks a lot.
Yeah.